everyone. Today we are going to start a new chapter of class 12 which is called evolution. Now this chapter is interesting in itself in the sense that it helps us to know the formation of the universe, the formation of our solar system, the earth which is just like a speck in this entire universe, and finally the journey of life from that primitive era till the present date. Now the first thing which we should learn about this chapter evolution is what is the meaning of evolution. See, there are certain misconceptions about evolution. People say that that is a formation of complex organisms from the simple one is known as evolution. It is not like that. Of course, the complex form have originated from the simple forms, pre-existing forms, but it is not that always the complex organisms will be surviving and the simple organisms will be vanishing off with the passage of time. Had it been so, then the primitive bacteria, the archaebacteria, the protozoa and the protistans would not have been existed togetherly with that of the metazoans, isn't it? So that definition of evolution is totally wrong. Okay, so what does evolution mean then? Evolution is a slow and steady process, a change, a gradual change in the course of time in an organism, of course in the composition of the earth, in the composition of the universe, and it is also irreversible. That means once the change has occurred, it cannot be, regained back the original form. That is what is the meaning of evolution is. So a slow and gradual change as well as an irreversible change is what is known as your evolution. Now this term evolution was coined by a scientist. The name of that scientist was your Spencer, Herbert Spencer. So we will name it as Spencer. So he was a scientist who has coined this term evolution. Okay. Now the topic of evolution in your NCERT has been studied under various subsections. Today which we are going to discuss is how the universe was formed, how the solar system was formed, how the earth was formed, and finally how the life might have originated in the earth and how it has progressed through a journey. Okay, so it is estimated that almost 20 billion years back, see billion not million, okay, so how much I said 20 billion years ago. Okay, 20 billion years ago it was estimated that a massive explosion took place. The name of the scientist is called as your A.B. Lemaitre. Okay, he has proposed a theory which is called a Big Bang theory. He said there was a huge mass of gas having electrons, protons and neutrons, and under huge temperature and huge pressure, this blasted, this led to an explosion which is named as your Big Bang theory. Now this Big Bang theory was proposed by A.B. Lemaitre, and he said that that is how the origin of the universe had taken place, and during that explosion many galaxies were formed, and these thousands of galaxies contained large number of stars, planets, then they contained the satellites, meteors, meteorites, so many things in them. And one such galaxy is the Milky Way or Akash Ganga, to which our solar system belongs to. So the origin of universe led to the origin of the galaxy, many galaxies. Out of that galaxy, our galaxy is the Milky Way. This question comes of 1 mark. Name the galaxy to which our earth belongs to. Then you can write Akash Ganga or you may write it as Milky Way. Okay, so you can write it as your Milky Way. Let us write it here. Milky Way galaxy. So Milky Way is the name of the galaxy to which our solar system belongs to. Now the solar system is the sun in the center with the 8 planets. Earlier 9 planets were considered, but now Pluto is not considered any longer a planet. So there are a total of 8 planets with their respective satellites. Some of them don't have satellites, some of them have large number of satellites, like the Jupiter. It is having the largest number of satellites. Then they have the asteroids, they have the meteors, meteorites, and then comets. So many things are there in the solar system. So that is how our solar system was formed and Earth was formed. During that period of time, there was no atmosphere. It had, of course, even if it had atmosphere, it did not have oxygen in it. The maximum gas which was found, the element was your hydrogen. Along with hydrogen there were nitrogen, there was sulfur, and of course there was carbon. So all these things led to the formation of the primitive atmosphere of the earth. Okay, so this is how the origin of the solar system and the origin of the universe and this journey took place. Now, when did the formation of this earth or our solar system took place? That was about 4.5 billion years ago. So 4.5 billion years ago, formation of the earth took place. Formation of the various things means earth was that time in a baby form. Okay, it had the primitive atmosphere, it had a lot of water vapor in its atmosphere, because of which condensation took place, and there was a heavy shower day after day, months after months, that led to the formation of the oceans, and the temperature was too high, unbearable. Perhaps no organism can survive in that high temperature, and because of which later you will find a term called hot dilute soup. That means the ocean was so hot, and within this high temperature there were reactions between the primitive gases, resulting into the formation of the organic molecules, which perhaps were the precursors of the present day life form. Okay, so this is the origin of universe 20 billion years back, origin of earth 4.5 billion years back, and now the origin of life. How did the origin of life entered into this earth, or what are the probable, you can say, ways by which life could have originated on this earth. So there are various theories. You will see in your NCERT many theories are just mentioned, just the term has been mentioned, but no explanation has been given. Only the one which is universally accepted, that is only explained properly. So let us talk about those theories. The first theory is the theory of special creation. Now this theory is supported by Bible, and it states that the life on this earth, the various forms of life on this earth, various substances on this earth were done in just 6 days, and the final day, that is on the 6th day, the animals were created. Along with that, human beings were also created. And also it states that the organisms which existed in the primitive past, they were exactly the same how the present day organisms are there. That means there is no change in the organisms. Rather, if an organism has become extinct due to some reason, it has become extinct, but no formation of new organisms have taken place in those years and years of journey. This is their philosophy, but it is not accepted. So the first theory, the theory of special creation, is cancelled. Okay, now the next theory, that is the theory of abiogenesis, or it is also known as spontaneous generation or autogenesis. Now these three things means the same, and auto means self, genesis means formation. This is a you can say the beauty of biology. By seeing the term only, you can identify the meaning of the things hidden in it. So theory of spontaneous generation, what does it states? There were many supporters, and Reddy was one scientist, Splanzani was one scientist. They said that organisms come from the pre-existing organisms, maybe in dead form or in living form. That is, from the living organisms can grow, or from the some parts of the living organisms can have an assemblage, and that may result into formation of new organism. Like they have a belief that from the mud of the Nile river and the straws, when they were subjected to sunlight, formation of reptiles, formation of amphibians, formation of even the small mammals can take place. But these all things were proved wrong by the experiments done by Louis Pasteur. And what did he did is that he took two okay, very long necked flask, and in that flask he took sterilized meat, okay, and he allowed it this flask to be open, that is the mouth of the flask to be open, and he left it for a few days. After a few days, he saw that there were formation of various kinds of worms, various kinds of microorganisms in this meat piece. So he wanted to know whether it is growing by itself, that means autogenesis is happening or not. For knowing this, what he did is that he just heated the neck portion of this flask and made it as swan neck. Okay, you can say he had twisted it. Okay, so he has made it somewhat like this. Okay, so he made it like this, and there he took the piece of meat, and then he has kept the sterile meat over there, and he kept it as such for 1 week almost. And to his surprise, he noticed that there were not any kind of organisms growing in this piece of meat. Rather, it was growing here, but when the neck of the flask was made swan-like, it was twisted. So in that case, it did not lead to the germination of any kind of organisms in it. So by this, he said that maybe the atmosphere is responsible for the entry of organisms into the sterile piece of meat and letting it to form a new organism. But in this case, since the neck is twisted, so it is acting like a filter. It is not allowing the entry of the organisms from the atmosphere, and thus the theory of spontaneous generation, the theory of abiogenesis, or the theory of autogenesis was rejected experimentally by this scientist, that is Louis Pasteur. The next thing which is discussed, the theory which is discussed for the formation or the origin of life on this earth is known as the cosmogenic theory. Now this theory, origin of universe, sometimes you will see in some books it is written as cosmic, that is your theory. Cosmic theory and cosmogenic theory is different. Cosmic theory, whenever it comes in exam, you have to keep it in mind that it is the Big Bang theory. Okay, and when it is cosmogenic theory, it is related to origin of life on earth. Now origin of life on earth, what does this cosmogenic theory tells us? It is also known as your theory of panspermia. That means from the external outer space, some spore or some seed might have traveled thousands and thousands of kilometers, and it might have reached our earth, and when it found the atmosphere in the earth, that an oxygenic atmosphere may be suitable, it germinated and it grew over there. But we all can understand that when a seed or a spore has to travel thousands of kilometers, subjecting to the UV radiation, subjected to the poisonous gases, low temperature, then no organism, no seed, no viable living object can survive in such a stressful or harsh condition. So that theory of panspermia was totally rejected by the scientist. Now what? Then how come life has come to the earth? Of course, the life has come to the earth by means of assumption, you can say a hypothesis, which was given by two scientists. The name of the scientists were Oparin and Haldane. Now Oparin was a Russian scientist and Haldane was a British scientist. Now they proposed one theory, that is chemical evolution of life. They have proposed it, they have given a hypothesis, it is not a theory. And what was their proposal? They said that in the primitive environment of the earth, due to high temperature, volcanic eruptions, thundering and lightning, the gases which were existing in the primitive environment must have collided with each other. Collision of or reaction between these gases might have taken place under those UV rays entering, because that time there was no ozone, no free oxygen, no formation of the shield around the earth was there. The earth's atmosphere was reducing atmosphere. That means reducing atmosphere is helpful for the formation of substances. It had more of hydrogen, that is why it was reducing. It was not oxidizing. The reason is because there was no oxygen. So that resulted, maybe that resulted into formation of organic molecules like that of your proteins, like that of your nucleic acids, which might have resulted into the primitive form of life, which they named it as protobionts. Okay, pro means beginning, means that is primitive. Bionts means having life in them. So protobionts was their concept, using the early primitive gases under those anaxygenic and conditions, those high temperature condition, those thundering, lightning and volcanic eruption kind of conditions. They proposed it, but they did not have any kind of evidence to prove their hypothesis. Now, their theory was taken seriously by another two scientists. The name of those two scientists was Miller and Urey. Now, Miller and Urey, what did they do is that they recreated that same primitive condition in laboratory. They took this kind of setup in which they have taken two round bottom flasks. In one round bottom flask, they took the primitive kind of gases like methane, ammonia, hydrogen and water vapor. And this methane, ammonia and hydrogen was in the ratio of 2:2:1. Okay, 2:2:1. That was the ratio of these primitive gases, and in one container they took boiling water to create that water vapor like atmosphere, because that time too much high water vapor content was there in the atmosphere. And there was a place in the entire setup through which a vacuum pump was introduced to take up all the oxygen from this setup, because there was an oxygenic condition in the primitive environment. So they did this, and then they have introduced two electrodes in it, and the temperature was kept as 800 degrees Celsius. So this electrodes which were kept over there, they could generate sparks, high voltages, and that resulted into mixing of these gases, primitive gases, resulting into formation of certain kind of molecules. Now when they passed through this tube, there was a condenser which contained cold water, that resulted into formation of water droplets containing those organic particles, and these were again settled into a trap, liquid water trap. In this, the sediments were collected. Now when they were analyzed, chemically analyzed, they found that they contained the primary amino acids like glycine, alanine, aspartic acid, and along with that some polysaccharides. Okay, even fatty acids were also found from there. So when they have seen these things, they were surprised, and they could confirm, a sort of confirmation was given to Oparin and Haldan's hypothesis of chemical evolution of life, that yes, the life may have originated on this earth by this method only. There is no other possibilities of life to come from some external outer space, and formation of this thing and that thing can take place. So this is how this was proved experimentally by Miller and Urey, the hypothesis of Haldan and Oparin. Now later on, Haldan and Oparin did not stop there. When they have performed this experiment, they took these kind of substances, amino acids, that is your basic polysaccharides, the carbohydrates, fatty acids, and they agitated it. Okay, they at a very high speed they agitated all these molecules rather, and they resulted into formation of some kind of proteins, and they also produced the RNA. Okay, this RNA which was produced, it was very surprising, and that was also perhaps the reason that why they could confirm that yes, RNA could be the possible genetic material of the primitive atmosphere. Why is it so? Because we all know that in central dogma, from DNA at first RNA is formed, and from RNA it is translated to protein. So when it is RNA, then RNA can easily form the protein, and RNA can act as an enzyme, but DNA never acts as an enzyme. DNA is stable compared to that of the RNA. So these are the various, you can say, the possibilities due to which the scientists had an opinion that the primitive genetic material of the primitive organism would have been RNA instead of DNA. Now this was further confirmed by another scientist. The name of that scientist was Hargobind Khurana. Okay, Hargobind Khurana. Now this scientist Hargobind Khurana, what did he do is that he in his lab only, he took the various ribonucleotides, and he in the laboratory condition only tried to make RNA, that is ribonucleotide acid. He tried to make it, and he was successful in making a short strand of 77 nitrogen bases, having the ribose sugar with that of the that is phosphoric acid and other things, and he was successfully able to make the RNA strand in the experimental condition, in the laboratory condition. So this was also one of the proof that since synthetically RNA can be produced without the involvement of any living organism, so perhaps this only could be the genetic material of the primitive past of the Earth's atmosphere. So now this person, Oparin and Haldane, what did they do is that they have got the idea of the primitive molecules and all those things. Then the question arises that how come the first cell, or you can say the living protobiont, would have come. So they then proposed this hot dilute soup. They said that because of too much of heavy rainfall, high temperature, the temperature of the water in the primitive atmosphere was too high. That resulted into accumulation of these organic molecules, resulting into formation of a colloid. And in this colloid was the accumulation of the larger that is, you can say, molecular weight particles, like that of your proteins or like that of your carbohydrates, in a spherical mass like structure, and they named it as coacervate molecules, but they did not say that it was surrounded by that of your any cell membrane like structure, because if there is a cell, it has to have an outer membrane like structure, but they did not say that. They just said it is a colloidal particle, and until and unless this colloidal particle divides, the genetic material divides, or this, or you can say this cell like structure divides, we cannot say that it is a living organism, because that is also one of the major characteristic of living organism. So another scientist, his name was Sidney Fox. Now Sidney Fox, what did he say is that he said that gradually, because of condensation of those larger molecular weight particles towards the center and combining it with that of the other organic molecules, that resulted into formation of nucleic acid, that is the RNA, in the center. And in the primitive environment, the formation of fatty acid was also seen in this liquid water trap, which along with that of glycerol resulted into formation of an outer wall, outer complete wall. And now when this outer complete wall was produced, it was made up of lipids and proteins. So that may be the primitive, you can say, the cell membrane around this you can say living protobiont, and they named it as your microsphere. So Sidney Fox named it microsphere, Haldane and Oparin, they named it as coacervate. And this microsphere, which Sidney Fox has said, was capable of showing division also. And if we compare it with the present day protista, it is somewhat very similar to that of the protista. So that might be the way how the present, the 5 kingdom classification which was made by Robert Whittaker, perhaps that protistans, the protozoans, might be, you can say, have arisen from Sidney Fox microspheres. And gradually in that anoxygenic environment, they might have been turned to the chemosynthetic type of, because they need food, and the chemosynthesis was a process because there was no free oxygen during that time. So they utilized the binded form of oxygen and they performed the process of chemosynthesis to obtain energy. And gradually, when there was free supply of oxygen, this oxygen would have formed the ozone shield around the earth. And once the ozone was formed, so the UV rays could not enter, the congeniality of the earth started becoming, and the life became easier on this earth. And gradually from anoxygenic, a shifting was made to oxygenic type of environment. And maybe that is how the cyanobacteria might have come, and that is how from them the metazoans might have come, and from there metaphyta might have come. So this is all assumptions, but of course some evidences we are getting in support of it, and that is how the journey of evolution has taken place on this earth, in this universe. 20 billion years back universe, 4.5 billion years back formation of the solar system and the earth, and formation of life just 2 billion years back. Okay, so this is how the thing is all about. And in case of the formation of the solar system, that is the nebular hypothesis, there you need to know the name of the scientist who proposed that. His name was called Kant. Okay, so the name of the scientist was called as your Kant. Kant has proposed the nebular hypothesis of solar system. That means the huge gas They condensed. In the center, the sun was formed, followed by various orbits and the paths in which the planets were revolving around the sun, as well as rotating around their own axis, having the satellites. So all this was proposed by Kant, and that is called the nebular hypothesis. Okay, fine. And of course, then origin of Earth. Of course, Earth belongs to that of solar system. Our solar system is a part of Milky Way. So gradual cooling of the Earth, gradual formation of the atmosphere, primitive atmosphere with the primitive kind of gases, everything took place. Origin of life with the various kinds of theories given by the various scientists, why they did not existed, or why they were not believed, because of various reasons I have discussed. And finally, the chemical evolution of life proposed by that of Haldane and Oparin and supported by Miller and Urey. And finally, the acceptance of protobionts of Haldane and Oparin and the microspheres by Sidney Fox, resulting into the present day organism. So this is all about today's class of evolution, with the various kinds of origin of universe, origin of solar system, origin of Earth, and origin of life. I hope you have understood the chapter well, and we will follow in our next class the next portions of this chapter.